For a very long time, I would have told you that No Mercy for the Nintendo 64 was the best wrestling game ever. I'd probably include the whole 4-game series on the 64 with the same control engine, starting back with WCW vs Nwo World Tour. The control scheme was revolutionary. Grappling, striking, running, blocking, reversing, everything was intuitive and responsive, allowing you to really feel in control. Before this, most wrestling games, like Pro Wrestling on the NES or Royal Rumble on Sega Genesis, were glorified button mashers, where you'd be lucky to pull off a lowly dropkick or a suplex. No Mercy's Create a Wrestler and Story Mode were better than anything at the time, and it even rewarded you for long-term play through unlockable items for purchase. It made its contemporaries on the PlayStation consoles look like utter trash. I'm looking at you, Acclaim. Other than No Mercy's occasional slow frame rates during 4-player mode, it seemed perfect, timeless, and unbeatable. After No Mercy, I played other wrestling games here or there, such as Def Jam Vendetta, a surprising rap-themed effort that built off the successful control scheme of No Mercy. I also liked the sleeper title Power Move Pro Wrestling for PS1, but after No Mercy, nothing really pulled me in again. That is, until I discovered Fire Pro Wrestling Returns on the PS2. Yes, I understand that Fire Pro Wrestling World is out on the PS4 right now, but from what I gather, it's just a souped-up version of Fire Pro Wrestling Returns with online play. I would still say that Fire Pro Wrestling Returns will always own my heart, partially due to it being a crucial notch on my personal wrestling timeline. I had taken a hiatus from wrestling after the Attitude Era. Right around the time I got back into it, I bought a used PS2 for cheap, with the intent of maybe reviewing some classic games. I saw Fire Pro Wrestling Returns on a list of games somewhere and found it really cheap on Amazon, so I figured I'd give it a shot. I have to admit I was a little skeptical at first. I loved my precious No Mercy, and I still felt wedded to its mechanics. Fire Pro Wrestling Returns' control scheme really deviated from what I was used to, and the entire game had a huge learning curve. The game has a difficulty range from 1 to 10, and I would definitely recommend starting on 1 until you're acclimated. The learning curve is nearly overwhelming, so I really wanted to break it down by different categories. And I have to give a spoiler alert, the learning curve is also what makes Fire Pro Wrestling Returns so incredible. And I admit that I actually looked online for some videos and tutorials to help me learn how to play. And I know that sounds like a big imposition for just a wrestling game you want to pick up and play, but I promise you if you have the patience with this game, it'll pay off. Let's start by talking about grappling and reversing. In a lot of wrestling games, grappling is either a war of button mashing, or it's like the No Mercy type system where you take control by winning the grapple itself and doing a move afterwards. The Fire Pro series uses a more free-flowing grapple system. If two wrestlers get close enough, they grapple automatically. In the exact moment when the wrestlers stamp their feet and lock up, you must hit your move, which is some combination of square, X, or circle and the D-pad. Reversals are also a matter of sensitive timing. Essentially, you must hit X or square at the correct moment to reverse a grapple move, an Irish whip, or a turnbuckle spot. The reversals are more likely to happen when you have higher stamina or when your opponent attempts a big spot too early in the match. With all of that being said, grappling is actually probably the easiest part of Fire Pro Wrestling Returns. Striking is kind of a different story. Striking is the most frustrating part of the game when you're playing early on. At first, I felt like I couldn't even connect with my weakest strikes. The ring is set up in an isometric style, which makes some of the angles seem a bit wonky at first. The key with striking is being patient. You want to wait and pounce with a strike instead of repeatedly flailing. In general, that should be your Fire Pro Wrestling mantra. Less is more, it's not a button mashing game. Pay close attention to the range of attack and your position in the ring. I'm much better at landing strikes now because I've learned the exact distance and range from one spot in the ring to the next. Same goes with measuring up running attacks on a standing or prone opponent. Striking is tricky, but it's very satisfying when you finally start hitting that flying knee or rolling lariat on a consistent basis. Alright, let's talk about breathing now. Yes, you have to breathe in this game, and you actually use the L1 button to do it. It feels like a chore at first, especially when you forget to do it and suddenly your big hoss wrestler is gassed in the first 5 minutes of the match.
Unjustifiably in a position that I'd rather not be in.
I've definitely lost some bouts from forgetting to breathe or not breathing enough.
On balance, off balance, doesn't matter. I'm living in a nightmare.
Make sure to get some wind when your opponent is down, especially late in the match, or just heave him outside the ring so that you can catch a breather while the ref counts him out. The whole breathing mechanic really fits the match pacing in Fire Pro Wrestling Returns. In this game, the matches truly build. The AI makes you work your way up to bigger, more impressive moves throughout. At first, early on in the match, you can only use your weak strikes and your weak grapple moves that you execute with the square button, but over time you'll be able to use your X moves, or the second tier, and then eventually the circle moves, the strongest set. If you try to use your X or circle moves too early, you'll be blocked or reversed 9 out of 10 times. This means that you might spend 5 minutes working someone over with flying mares and fireman's carries before you can hit a pile driver or a pendulum backbreaker. The bigger and tougher the opponent, the harder it is to progress through your moveset. Again, this is frustrating at first, but once you get used to it, it actually makes total sense for the momentum and the choreography of a wrestling match. It also creates a game within a game as you try to see how fast you can work your way up your move tiers without being foiled. It's also cool to see how the AI settings for different wrestlers affect the match lengths and the pacing. I've had Hollywood Hogan hulk up on me after 20 minutes, even though I thought I had him dead to rights. Certain settings make certain characters more explosive early on, while others are programmed to get a second wind late in matches. All of this creates a very unique gameplay each time, and I'd even say that simulating and watching matches in this game can be an entertaining experience. I also have to include the modes and settings of the game underneath its learning curve umbrella. Really, modes and settings shouldn't be things that have a learning curve. They should be accessible, but unfortunately that's not really the case here. Why? For one, it's because Fire Pro Wrestling Returns is set up as a bunch of baseline options that you can highly customize. As a very small example, you can't even select Tag Team Match as an option, but you instead have to select Exhibition and then add the number of wrestlers on each team. I had to reference online forums just to figure out how to get certain settings and stipulations I wanted. Another reason it's complicated is because it's a Japanese import, and certain things are muddled in translation. In some cases, it becomes counterintuitive, with yes really meaning no, and vice versa due to phrasing and terminology. Interference is called cut play, managers and valets are called seconds. There's a homebrew match type called SWA Rules, which is exclusive to this game. You use the right joystick to open and expand menus, which gets confusing fast, and it's very easy to hit the wrong button and accidentally cancel or select something. Above all else, this could probably be the biggest detriment for first-time users, because it feels like one giant barrier to entry before you reap any reward. Thankfully, the Fire Pro series has an active online community that shares info and answers to many users' questions. You can't talk about the learning curve of Fire Pro Wrestling Returns without talking about its Create a Wrestler mode. CAW mode is one of the best parts about wrestling games. I mean, who doesn't want to see themselves as the champ? It's always fun to invent ludicrous gimmicks or achieve hilarious in-ring physics as a result of your weird creations. The super expansive CAW mode in Fire Pro is unmatched, but its vast open canvas also makes it incredibly intimidating. I think my first creator wrestler took me about 4 or 5 hours, and it was pretty shoddy. I can't cover everything about edit mode in Fire Pro Wrestling Returns, but here are some examples of how expansive it is. You don't just choose a color or a shade, but a gradient. There are 400 sound bites you can sample from for your wrestlers, including grunts, screams, and catchphrases, and you can assign them to your different moves. There are over 400 different options for faces and heads, with additional options for layering the faces and heads. It contains an encyclopedic amount of moves, truly epic. Moves that didn't even appear in American games or on American TV at the time. It's like getting a ring worker's education. Just previewing all the strong grapple moves could take you 20 to 30 minutes. You can customize your wrestlers' AI logic and parameters, making them more likely to do certain moves, more likely to go for a pin after certain moves, etc. It's a ton of work, but it really does make the wrestlers come to life. It's almost scary how accurate it can be if done well. You assign your wrestler a fighting style, power, technical, shooter, mysterious, along with certain traits with vague names like monster, warrior, banish, guts. You'll definitely want to consult the manual, but even that is tough to navigate. The more synergy between these classifications and your movesets, the better your performance. So you're forced to typecast your wrestler a bit, which is another example of how this game is harder but more realistic. I'm just scratching the surface of edit mode here. This game in general is anything but casual. It invites you to build your own world, and you must embrace that task. Alright, let's talk about the best parts of the game, which I'm going to call the high spots. Honestly, once you get past the learning curve, this game is a treasure trove. If you're a wrestling connoisseur, and if you love games with a classic feel, this is a must play. I think some people will be surprised to find that graphics are included in my high spots. I could see why people would knock Fire Pro Wrestling Returns for its graphics, but I actually view them as a strength. Yes, the graphics are 2D, and they use sprite-based wrestler models and somewhat choppy animations to go along with the 2D visuals. If this were an SNES game, it'd be one of the best-looking games on the system. Spike was clearly more focused on gameplay, customization, and an expansive roster. No need to mess with a classic look. I think the move animations look great, and the old-school presentation gives the game extra charm. If we're talking about sound, I've also read criticism about Fire Pro Wrestling Returns, music, and sound quality, but I have qualms with this complaint. Yes, I would say the game's opening theme and the menu theme are a little frenetic and repetitive, but I think the 12 tracks that you play while you're wrestling are varied and quite badass. I also appreciate the 56 entrance theme choices for your creator wrestlers, with a wide-ranging variety of styles. Just like the visuals, this would be an amazing soundtrack on an SNES or Genesis game. And shouldn't that be good enough? Why does this game have to be judged based on its era or platform? Games like Shovel Knight, for example, have used throwback graphics in the modern era to much success and acclaim. If a game is fun to play, even 12 years later, what else really matters? The ridiculous amount of sound bites built into the game make for a dynamic, sometimes funny in-ring experience.
What? 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 Ready, go! Crasher! Brain Buster! DDT! Feel the power! Oh no! Bang, bang! Ichiban! Number 1! Over! Finish! Whoa, whoa, whoa!
Wrestlers laughing maniacally while slapping their asses. Wrestlers yelling Brainbuster and bang bang like they're in a goddamn comic book. Wrestlers barking like dogs or screeching like banshees. Sometimes you'll even hear Viva Mexico! Some might think this sounds cheesy, but again, I really see it as being part of the charm. The customization is truly what makes this game so special. It gives you space to create 500 custom wrestlers. You also can create 10 referees, 10 rings, and 6 logos. With some effort, I downloaded a ton of CAWs online, and I have to give a big shout out to the creator, whose name is Lord Worm. And I uploaded these to my PS2 memory card using this device called the Action Replay Max. It's pretty archaic stuff. I also uploaded a bunch of logos, like a classic WWF, an ECW, a TNA, etc., that I could use for my custom rings, which I built with stats and details found online. It was a lot of rigmarole, but all of this is totally worth it. I filled my 500 slots with WWF, WWE, WCW, ECW, TNA, and indie CAWs. I gotta say, Lord Worm is a goddamn artist. So it feels like I'm playing with an authentic dream roster. Plus, I already have the 327 wrestlers that come default with the game. Yes, they don't have their real names due to copyright, but a lot of them are based on very real wrestlers from around the world. Sure, my roster doesn't have some modern WWE guys, and I don't have that many American female wrestlers, but otherwise my library is stacked. It is unmatched, even by most modern games. This means constant dream matches. Cactus Jack versus Bruiser Brody, for example. It also means randomizing things and ending up with hilarious combinations like Jesse Ventura versus Aldo Montoya in a barbed wire death match. I can't even fathom the possible combinations that I could achieve with this game and with the roster I have. The different arenas and rings allow you to recreate pretty much any atmosphere or ambiance that you would want, from an indie warehouse gym with 40 fans to a huge dome stadium with strobe lights and Titantrons. Let's talk about gimmick matches and stipulations, which can be a little complex. There are no ladder matches in this game like there are in No Mercy, which is certainly a bummer. But here are all the match stipulations that you can achieve with the options available in Fire Pro Wrestling Returns. You can have a cage death match, either escape, pinfall, or give up. You can have a barbed wire death match, a landmine death match, a battle royal, over the top, or last man standing. You can have a triple threat match. You can have a handicap match, a submission only match, a no holds barred match, a tag and 6-man tag match, normal or tornado. You can achieve a 4 vs 4 Survivor Series match. You can have a tournament from 4 to 64 wrestlers. You can have an SAW rules match, which has rounds and TKOs. You can also do an S1 rules match, where there's no grappling and only strikes and you win by TKO. And you can also do a gruesome fighting style match, which is in an octagon, where you win by submission or TKO with no rope breaks. Obviously, it's an exhaustive list of different match styles that you can achieve, although you have to customize your options to achieve these stipulations. You won't be able to just find a lot of them necessarily. Wrestlers can use a variety of weapons too. You can have chairs, pieces of tables, bats, barbed wire bats, sledgehammers, kendo sticks, fluorescent lights. Sometimes the weapons are already in the ring if you set it up that way, and they can always be found under the ring. Every wrestler in the game has a critical move that has the potential for a TKO or an automatic pinfall or submission. Every match, you can set the critical to being low, medium, or high, and I strongly recommend high, which gives a lot more hilarity and drama. There's nothing better than hitting a burning hammer and TKOing your opponent on the entrance ramp. You can also create your own title belts, junior or heavyweight, and you can play title matches. This lets you loosely simulate a story mode in your own head, since you can push wrestlers or book matches that sound worthy of your championship straps. All of this leads to immersive, varied gameplay. As said before, the combinations and possibilities are endless if you have enough willpower and imagination. I think it's fair to say that this game is genuinely an education. As someone who is just getting back into wrestling, I found this game at the perfect moment. It sounds stupid, but I really feel like it's taught me a lot. It's broadened my wrestling lexicon and taught me countless new moves. It's also become the Bible that I reference for names of very obscure moves and move types. After downloading all of my CAW wrestlers online, I was able to catch up with a lot of the WWE talent that I missed out on during my hiatus. From the bad, like Heidenreich, to the good, like Bray Wyatt. This game was also my first introduction to names like Colt Cabana, B-Boy, Pentagon Jr., guys who are either killing it in the indies or currently working for AEW. I was never even really a big TNA person, but this let me get a taste of that world as well. Even though the default wrestlers don't have their real names, Fire Pro's fake promotions like View Japan and Olive Japan are great stand-ins for real ones like New Japan and All Japan, so I've been able to learn more about international federations as well. This is especially true when you play Matchmaker Mode in the game, where you're able to book events for these different promotions based on their style and audience. The game's volume and depth make it a wrestling almanac, or better yet, a digital wrestling artifact that I think is truly timeless. Alright, if you're a Fire Pro hater, this is probably your favorite part of the review. I'm going to talk about the major botches in the game. The menus can't be left off the list. Even for a Japanese port with a steep learning curve, these menus are unacceptably cryptic. There are so many barriers to entry, especially when creating your first wrestler or playing your first match. This game is the furthest thing from instant gratification. I really wouldn't blame new users for getting flustered. I can hear the boring chants already. It's also frustrating when you accidentally hit the wrong button and undo a long chain of options you've just spent 5 minutes selecting. The lack of story mode is also pretty rough. I've warmed up a bit to the game's Matchmaker Mode, where you play the role of Booker. It's nice that you can participate in the matches as a player. It's also cool that they throw in random twists to the cards that you booked, like a heel team suddenly adding a third wrestler to make a handicap match. But I'm not a fan of the game's League Mode, which just feels like an overly complicated version of the tournament option, with very little payoff. As said before, with all the CAWs and the options, you can essentially create your own story mode, but it'd be really nice if this game just threw in a simple story mode option where you choose a wrestler and rise up in the ranks, maybe doing jobs at first, but then getting a push, then cutting some promos, fighting some monster heels, winning some titles. I'm not asking for much. It would just be nice to be able to do some kind of simple story mode to introduce yourself to the game. Something like event mode or pay-per-view mode would be very cool too. I would love if you could book a whole event without the restrictions of Matchmaker Mode and then see the entire thing play out in a little production. And I'd be okay with just some images and scrolling text. But it'd be really cool if I could set up a whole pay-per-view like Survivor Series or King of the Ring. You know, you can already kind of relive those things, but it'd be great if they gave it a frame for you. Those are the major botches. There's also some minor botches as well. I would say the title belts and the seconds or managers that you can play with are minor botches in this case. It's great that you can create your own belts, but imagine my disappointment when my champion strolled down the entrance ramp, midriff fully exposed, naked at his waist. The belts never show up in the actual gameplay at all. Come on. I just went through all those designs and color gradients just so that I could see the belt on the title menu. That's weak, but better than nothing, I guess. It's cool that you can assign a wrestler as your second or manager, but it forces the screen to zoom out in a really unsettling, distracting way. Plus, the seconds hardly seem to interact with the matches. On occasion, I've seen them get up on the apron and hassle the ref, but that's about it. They might be able to strike wrestlers on the outside, but I've never seen them grapple. I'd also say the Battle Royal and multi-man matches are kind of a minor botch. When there are too many bodies in the ring during a Fire Pro match, I would say more than 4, it can get a bit spastic and clunky. Sure, you can position your wrestler with the R1 button, but targeting different opponents is really tricky, and you often end up randomly grappling someone in the middle of the fray. It's a very small complaint, and it's rather unavoidable. I usually just turn off countouts and fight outside the ring to create more separation from the pack if I need to. I also feel like the test of strength that happens in the game is a minor botch. When you and your opponent initiate a grapple move at the same time, you go into a test of strength where the wrestlers interlock their fingers and push back and forth. You're supposed to tap the D-pad in the right direction, but once you get to a certain difficulty level in the game, like 5, 6, 7, it becomes impossible to beat the computer in a test of strength. It's futile and demoralizing, especially when you're someone like Brock Lesnar and you lose to someone like Finn Balor every single time. I have to say the logo designer is kind of a minor botch as well. It's cool that this is even an option, but dear God, you'd have to be some kind of savant with endless patience to be able to use this tool effectively. It's pixel by pixel. I'm amazed they even bothered putting in all the trouble to program this indecipherable version of Microsoft Paint. I'm even more amazed that people out there have created such amazing logos with this primitive tool. So what's the final verdict on Fire Pro Wrestling Returns? If I'm being objective, I can't give it a perfect 10 out of 10, even though that's what my heart is telling me to do. So let's go with a 9 out of 10. A 9 that is chock full of love. In wrestling terms, I'd give the game 4.5 stars. I think one's rating is very relative here. For a hardcore wrestling fan, this could definitely be a 10 out of 10, certainly an 8 or a 9. But I think for a more casual wrestling fan or just a pick up and play gamer, this could fall as low as 2, 3, or 4. The learning curve, wonky menus, and utter disregard for user-friendliness could definitely repel some people. I also can't totally ignore the game's limitations in its graphics, sound, and presentation, which might be more important to certain people in the modern era where we have more formidable hardware and tech. It's awesome that I was able to find all this downloadable content for the game even though it came out in 2007, 12 years ago. The Fire Pro community is awesome. Without all the forums, message boards, edit packs, CAW guides, etc., I never would have discovered this game's full magic potential. Wrestling is truly a subculture, a bottomless rabbit hole that requires a deep dive for genuine appreciation, and this game really captures that aspect of it that I love so much. For me, the game is a legit spiritual experience. You can call me crazy if you want, but you should just pick it up for yourself. It's only $30 on Amazon, and it's as low as $4.50 for a used copy. If you liked my review of Fire Pro Wrestling Returns, please don't forget to like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Also, let me know what you think of the Fire Pro series in the comments. Do you think it's better than No Mercy? Yay or nay? Stay tuned, I'll be back for a deep dive into Def Jam Vendetta, another hidden wrestling gem on the PS2. This is Frank Incensed, and thanks for watching.
Nobody does it better.